So first of all, yeah, making charts more accessible to all users. So just to introduce who I am. So my name is Hannah Thomas and I work for the analysis function in government. And I'm based in the ONS, but my work is very cross-government facing. So we're here to help anyone across government working on data, stats or analysis. And my role in particular is helping people be better at communicating their data, their stats or analysis. So I don't do just accessibility stuff. We do more general best practice guidance on data viz and writing about stats and spreadsheets and how to get spreadsheets better, make spreadsheets better. So it's not just about accessibility, but it's a big part of my work because it's the one we get asked about a lot. So that's who I am. So what is digital accessibility? What do I mean by it? Well, it's about making the content we publish online, mainly on HTML, in HTML content, but also can be through documents, although we'd always advise HTML. But it's about making it more accessible and usable and understandable to all users, regardless of any impairments or disabilities or medical conditions. Be that a permanent thing or a temporary thing, like if you break your arm and you can't use your mouse, something like that. So it's all about, yeah, making things accessible to all different types of users with different types of needs. So if you publish on public sector websites, which I'm guessing some of you might be, you are covered by the legislation that came into force in 2020. And this says that all content published on public sector websites must meet the A and AA success criterion in the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, which are often referred to as WCAG. They've been updated this year. So what I've basically done is gone through the success criterion, done a bunch of research and tried to apply the success criterion to data viz, and also done it in the past to spreadsheets. So that's where everything's kind of based on the accessibility guidelines. So to start off with colours then. So colours is a big thing in terms of accessibility. It's a big thing in terms of colour blindness, but also in terms of low vision and other things that also interact with your ability to see colour and interpret colour. It's not all about colour blindness. And the best way to think about accessibility is start off by thinking about empathy. So yeah, this is a chart and I'm a sighted user. I don't have any issues seeing color. So to me, that chart's absolutely fine. I can see all the different parts of the stack. I can match everything to the legend. I don't have a problem with it. But if I did have some sort of color blindness, I might have a big issue seeing the difference between that pink and blue. So I might see things in black and white, but I might have a different type of color blindness. And it just means that those pink and blue are both looking blue and they're both looking very, very similar. So that makes it hard for me to see the stacks, but it also makes it really hard for me to match the legend. It's in both ways. And then in this one, so in this one, we've used the color palette that we've developed. So all the colors on this color palette and everything all our guidance and everything is all available publicly on our analysis function website. It's not behind a login or anything, so you're all able to access that. So this color palette we developed, all the colors have enough contrast with a white background. So nobody will have problems seeing them against a white background. And they'll also have enough contrast with adjacent colours when they're used in this order. So the dark blue has enough contrast to meet the regs with the turquoise. The turquoise has enough contrast to meet the regs with the dark pink, and then the dark pink has enough with the orange. If you use them out of order, you're going to get issues with adjacent colours. But in order, you are meeting the regs. And that doesn't mean you're going to be absolutely perfect for every single user. But the best we can do is meet the regs and try to meet the needs of as many people as we can. But the problem with this one, so we're not a problem with the colours, we can see all the bars and everything, but the problem with it is if I've got a certain type of colour blindness, I'm not going to be able to match the legend. So I'm going to have problems matching that dark pink and the dark blue to what they are in the legend, because it will depend on how I see it. So somebody I did this presentation a couple of days ago and someone said, oh, but it's in the right order. So the legend's in the order of the bars in the cluster. And that's fine. That's exactly what we're going to do. But we need to tell people that. So how can we help? We need to tell people that we're going to come on to that in a second. We need to tell people that it's in the right order, because you might not know. If you can't match those colours, you don't know they're in necessarily the correct order. So how can we help? This was meant to be a picture of my children in the background of this, but I couldn't find a picture of them helping each other. So these are stock image children being nice to each other. So the first thing, the first sort of rule to stick to, and these do get much more complicated. This is sort of the basic rules. First rule to stick to is a 3:1 contrast ratio for adjacent elements. So you take like the luminance, basically a measure of luminance of one color, measure of luminance of another one, and you say, I think it's luminance anyway, I'm not sure, but you put the hex codes in this online calculator and it tells you whether it meets the required level of contrast. So that's the first rule. So let's have a little look at that. So like I said, we've developed these color palettes. They're all online. We've got all the different codes you need to use them. And we're mainly going to look at the categorical one today, but the guidance, the colors guidance, goes into much more detail about how to use the sequential and the focus and the different drawbacks with them. So it's a chart we just looked at. So like I just said, this meets all the 3:1 contrast ratio requirements because it's using our thing. So we get a green tick for that. This one then is a sequential palette. So sometimes you need a sequential palette if your data follows some sort, if the categories follow some sort of sequence, it makes sense to use a sequential palette. So here we've got age groups. So it makes sense that it probably would make more sense looking at this now, whether they should be going up in darkness, you should get darker the older you are. I think that would probably make more sense. So just looking at that one. So ignore that bit. It should be going the other way. But the general gist is, yeah, sometimes we need sequential data. And when we do that, are we meeting the contrast requirements? Well, no, we get a cross for this one. We're not meeting them this time because it's just not possible when you have a sequential palette to have all colors have enough contrast with a white background and enough contrast with all the colors they're next to. So that light blue doesn't have enough contrast with the white, so some people won't be able to see the light blue bar. And then neither of them, I don't think neither of them have enough contrast with the mid blue. So it's issues with the adjacent colors. So how can we help with that? Well, first of all, we use the outlines. So you can give, we generally would say don't use outlines for bars because they add like unnecessary clutter, but for this they're needed. So we use the outlines to help people see those lighter blue bars. And secondly, we leave these little gaps between the bars in the cluster so the colors aren't directly adjacent to each other. You can do that with clustered bar charts, the outline thing. Obviously, with stacked bar charts, you can't really use outlines because you're going to mess about with the scale and the size of the stack, and it could be a bit misleading. But for these ones, we can. So that's what we advise there. When we're using sequential palette with line charts, though, you can't obviously use outline. You can't outline a line. It's going to be very strange if you did that. So some people are going to have problems seeing that light blue line. And they're going to have problems where the light blue crosses over with the mid blue. So we're not going to get a tick for this. We're going to get a cross again. How can we help with this one? Well, the caveat with this one is, like I said, it does get a little bit more complicated. The 3:1 contrast ratio rule applies unless the presentation is essential for communicating the message. So we can help by only using this palette when essential. So only using it when we definitely need sequential data, when we have sequential data. Otherwise, use the categorical color palette. So the second rule for color then is you should not use color alone to communicate a message. So you should have some other way of communicating that message. So like we did just talk about, I just mentioned, with this one, we're using color alone at the moment to match the bar to the legend. The only way you can match the bar to legend is by matching the colors. So what we need to do, we're getting across that. So how can we help with that? Oh, so this, I always forget I put this on. So this just demonstrates the point more clearly. The first and the third bar in each cluster look very much the same color, hard to match them to the legend. So what can we do to help? Well, we can say just a little note above that just says the legend is presented in the same order and orientation as the bars in each cluster. We don't even need to say orientation, I think, in this because it's kind of obvious, the same orientation. But just to drill home, it should always be in the same orientation because you do see charts, we have clustered bars, but the legend is vertical. And then it's even harder to match up the legend. So yeah, just a little bit of extra information just so people are able to match legends to bars. And sometimes people say, oh, we can use pattern. Pattern's a good idea to help users match. You're not just using color then, you're using pattern as well. And yeah, that does pass the criteria that we need to pass. But for me, it's a bit questionable. For me, I think it adds a lot of clutter. It's not always easy to match pattern because it's not always easy to make these little boxes up here very big. So it's not really always easy to see the patterns, not always easy to add. And sometimes, especially with line charts, when you use textured lines or sort of patterned lines, you get the problem they can be misinterpreted. And I've always got to remember all the misinterpretations, but it is they can be seen as incomplete data, provisional data, forecasted data, a target or a subcategory, because that's what generally patterns and dashes and dots can be used for. So we've got to be careful with pattern. It can definitely help, but we can't think of it as like the answer to everything. So this is where I'm going to try and do a little bit of interactivity. So we'll see how it goes. So basically, I'm asking you now, this is the chart showing levels of satisfaction in public institutions. So it's nice for you. The NHS sort of scores quite well on this. So we're going to ask you, are we meeting the contrast requirement? So do all the elements have a 3:1 contrast ratio with the adjacent and with the white background? So if you think it does, can you raise your hand? I think that might be a way. Or if you can do it through Menti, Rachel, I don't know. Let's see how raising your hand works. Okay, so I can see. Yeah, hands going up.
If people want to put it on Menti, they can't raise their hand. But yeah, I think we've got lots of hands.
Yeah, so seeing lots of, yeah, looks like lots of hands are coming up. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. We get the tick. We've used the our recommended color palette, and we used it in the right order. So like I said, not going to be 100% perfect for everyone, but most people should be able to differentiate between the stacks and be able to see all the colors against the white background. So we're fine there. So if you could put your hands down, so we're back to we'll sort of reset ourselves. So to do that. This is where it might fall apart, putting the hands down. Okay, pretty good. So the next one is, do not use color alone to communicate a message. So are we meeting that requirement? Do we get a green tick for that one? Put your hand up if you think we get a green tick.
Let's sure.
Yeah, let's run this one. Okay, no, for this one, we are getting the red cross because we are using color alone to match to the, we haven't given them any other information. The only way they can match the label to the stack is by using color for that one. So that's where you've got to put the little bit of extra information. And how can we help? We've got to say, like we said before, the legends play the same order notation as the stacks in the bars. So just got to give that a bit of extra information so people can have better chance of matching the labels. So that's what we do with that one. So what about small multiples? So sometimes instead of cluster bars, it's better to do with small multiples where we break them all down and we do 4 little charts instead of trying to put them all on one chart. So on this one, do we think we're meeting? So put your hand up if you think we're meeting the contrast requirement here. Hands up, 17. Okay, maybe a little bit less sure on that one. Yeah, so on this one, yeah, we're getting a green tick for that one. We could make them all blue. That's the really good thing about small multiples. You don't really need all the different colors here because they've all got the same charts. You could just make them all dark blue. But yeah, all these colors have enough contrast with a white background, and none of them now are adjacent to anything. So they all pass all the color contrast requirements. So that's really good. And what about hands down? Hands down first. Or keep it up if you think it's still green. But yeah, are we meeting this? Are we getting a green tick on this one? Do not use color alone to communicate a message. So are we getting a green tick or a red cross? Put your hand up if you think we should get a green tick for this one. Cool, yeah. You see quite a few there. So yeah, we are getting green tick this time because we haven't got to rely on a legend. That is the great thing about, again, small multiples. You haven't got to rely on a legend. The drawbacks to small multiples are they can be a bit fiddly to do. So there is a way of doing them in R. I don't know what you kind of make charts on the most. I'm still very old-fashioned. I still use Excel and PowerPoint. But yeah, you can make them on R and other software packages, but they can be a bit fiddly. And they can look a bit small online sometimes. Depends where you publish and how you can publish. But I know we have problems with them on the analysis function website, is that all the sort of text gets quite small. So they can be, they solve a lot of problems, but they also have their own issues as well. This one then, so this one is a stacked bar, but it's showing positive and negative values. So do you think we are passing the contrast requirement? Put your hand up if you think we deserve a green tick for the contrast requirement for this chart.
I think there's a few leftover hands. So put your hand,
Yeah.
put your hand down if you disagree.
Yeah, remember put your hand down if you disagree, yeah. Okay, so we are using our palette for this one, but we're actually getting a red cross for it because when we got negative values in stack bars, things do not stay in the same order. They all move around. And then the problem becomes that we get in this dark pink against this dark blue. So it's meant to be in this sort of order here, and that's fine. But here, this is moving around. So some people aren't going to be able to see this here, this here, this might be hard. Yeah, so that's the main issue. You have to, we say we don't use stacked bars when you've got negative values because you just can't control, and there aren't enough colors to have more than two that have enough contrast with the white background and enough contrast with each other. So it can get a bit tricky when you've got a couple of series on a chart. And are we using color alone? Do we deserve a tick? Put your hand up if you think we deserve a tick for that one. Not use color alone. Nobody went up? Okay, that's good because yeah, we're also feeling that one because we got the legend again. So the only way you can match it to the legend is by using color. And in this one, you can't even say, oh, the legend is in the same order because the order changes all the time. So you can't even use that sort of like little tweak to make it accessible. How can we help with this then? Well, this was again, small multiples is a good idea here because we split them all up. We've got no contrast issues now. We've got no legend issues. So, and they do show you maybe the message is a little bit clearer now because I'm not putting it all on one chart. I've split it all out. So if I want to look at what the growth rates are for different areas of the economy, I can see that maybe area 3 isn't, it's much easier to see, more obvious that area 3 isn't contributing as much. Or depending on what your message is, it can also make this a bit clearer. Yeah, and it's a good idea. Then we can really limit the clutter as well to note that you only have to have this axis on the first chart, and then it sort of carries across to all of them. So we can reduce clutter as well with them. So looking at this one, so this is a very busy line chart, lots of lines on it. Are we passing the contrast ratio for this one? Are we getting a tick? Put your hand up if you think we deserve a tick for this one. Okay, so we are getting across this one because although we have started off, we have used our color palette, because like I said, it's really hard with line charts. As soon as we go past more than 2 lines, there are not enough colors for all the lines to have enough contrast with the white background and enough contrast with each other. So this blue has enough contrast with the turquoise and with the orange, but it doesn't have it with the pink. So it's crossing there. And all these down here, because they all cross over so much, there's going to be really, really hard to sort of match, sort of work out which line is which for some people. So we are failing on the contrast on this one. And it's basically very hard to pass contrast with more than 2 lines, unless all your lines just happen to be very, very separate, which can happen sometimes, and they don't cross over, but usually they do cross over somewhere. So what about a tick for this one? This is a bit trickier, but this one, using color alone, do you think we're getting a tick or a cross for this one? Put your hand up if you think it's a tick. See a few hands going up. Okay, so this is a weird one. So I've given it a tick, but it can be argued. So first, I've given it a tick because we've what's called labeled all the lines directly, so we haven't used a legend, so that's good. But we haven't. It's arguable. Like the only way you can follow a line is by using color. We could follow a line back, so it is a bit of a weird one. It's a bit of an arguable one, and generally line charts with more than 4 lines we sort of say try to avoid them, because it's very hard to work out what the message of that chart is, what you want the user to look at, focus on. It can get quite tricky. So how can we help when we have this data, we have all this data that we want to communicate? So sometimes, again, people say dots and dashes, but like as we mentioned before, there's issues with people misinterpreting them as being missing data or being forecast or provisional or things like that. Also, the formatting. So this is a dashed line, but you can see that the dashes all sort of meld into one. And here, that's a dashed line as well, but like the formatting doesn't always carry through. So it can be that can also cause an issue. And you've still got, like, we've only used the orange and the blue have enough contrast with each other, but the orange and the orange don't. So you're relying on the dashes then to tell you between them, and you shouldn't only rely on shape. So yeah, patterns aren't the answer, basically. Sometimes people say data markers. So maybe data markers could be the answer. Maybe we give them all that, but that's like a bit of a crazy chart. Still quite a lot of stuff going on. What's the message of that chart? I'm not sure it's entirely accessible to follow that. It would technically pass the success criterion, which shows you that it's not a perfect science, the success criterion. Not a perfect chart. So probably better to go with a focus chart. And this was when we were working on the slides for the COVID briefings. So we wanted to pick out the UK, what was happening to UK, and we wanted to have those grey lines there just as sort of a background comparison, say, look, this is what's going on in the rest of Europe. So we've picked out the UK. Now these grey, that doesn't actually meet the contrast requirements with the white. But if you're arguing, look, this is the essential message, then I'm getting the essential message across. And this is just background information that's useful to have. You can argue that that's essential to do that. And again, sometimes the best solution is small multiples again, where you can clearly see all the different situations in the different countries. They're all on the same scale, and you can compare them there. So sometimes that's where small multiples can again be really helpful. So that's all about colour. Like I said, we've got colours guidance. I can share all the links. I can't share it in the chat, but at the end of the slide, there's a link to our support page, and our support page outlines all the guidance we've got. And like I said, it's all publicly available. That's all about colour. So now we're on to alternative text. So I'm assuming some of you will have a vague idea what alternative text in. We'll be providing alternative text sometimes. So generally, alternative text is given in the code behind an image. So when you upload an image to a website, you put a little bit of something in the alt text field, so that a screen reader user will get something read out when they hit an image that tells them what that image is. So that's the way it's normally used, and it was brought in like for screen reader users and sometimes for when images won't load. But we're going to talk about in a slightly different way today in a little bit more detail. So again, to start off with empathy. Again, they aren't my children. I do try and get my children in, but I couldn't find them being empathetic either. So that's some more, they may be the same stock kids, I don't know, but they're there again. So if we start off with some empathy. So this, if you're a sighted user, this is what you would see on an ONS page. So you get this headline title. ONS calls it a headline title that gives you the message of the chart. Then you get this stats title. Overseas residents visits to the UK by month, January 2018, May 2022. Then you get the legend, then you get the chart. And it's quite a good example. After I put this in, I realized that it is quite a good example because it's very visual, this chart. You can immediately see this massive drop in overseas residents visits. So it's massive drop in people coming to the UK, obviously because of the pandemic, and you can see how it recovered a little bit and then went down again and then recovered a little bit more. So it's quite a powerful visual image. So I'm getting quite a lot by glancing at that. Because it communicates that message quite well. But if I had a screen reader, if I was a screen reader user, I would get something a bit different. So if you can, I can't tell if you're doing it, but if you can close your eyes, so only Rachel you're the only one I can tell is doing it. So if you close your eyes and you're using a screen reader software to access that information, then you would hear figure 1, European and North American residents helped to push visits to the UK May 2022 up higher than the previous year. Then you would hear overseas residents visits to the UK by month, January 2018 to May 2022. And then you would hear clickable link, all visits thousands, clickable link, North America thousands, clickable link, Europe thousands, clickable link, other countries thousands. And then you would hear May 22, Dec 21, July 21, Feb 21, Sep 20, April 20, Nov 19, Jan 19, Jan 19, Aug 19, Aug 18, Ma 18. And then you would hear 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2, 0, 0, 0, 3, 0, 0, 0, 4, 0, 0, 0, 5, and then you would your source information, blah, blah. You can open your eyes again now. That is not an equivalent experience to looking at that chart. And it did take me quite a while to work out what it was reading. And obviously it's reading this backwards, and then it's reading these digit by digit. So that is because there is something up with ONS chart builder charts. So they're very good if you're a sighted user, and they're very good. You can actually click these on and off, so you can look at different elements of the chart. So we don't want to take any of that away, because there's lots of stuff that's really good about chart builder, but it's really not serving the purpose for screen reader users, because it's just reading out the axis labels, which isn't useful at all to anyone. You are getting some information because you're getting the message of the chart here, but you're not getting an equivalent experience to looking at the chart. Now, sometimes on other websites, you don't get maybe that experience. You don't get like it reading out all the axis labels, but you get a very basic alt text read out. So you just get image of line chart showing overseas residence visits, UK Jan 2018 to May 2022. It basically repeats the stats title. Doesn't really tell you what's in the chart at all. And this thing where it says image, that can also be quite annoying, because the screen reader will announce that it's an image already, so they get told that information twice. So how can we do better? Oh, sorry, let's always forget this. So this also, sometimes people say to me, oh, well, I haven't provided a description of the chart, but I have provided the data behind it, and so people can access the data. Now, first of all, this isn't an accessible spreadsheet. This is just a standard download that comes with it. So the table isn't marked up. So markup is when there's sort of code behind the table that tells the screen reader how it's set out. This table isn't marked up. It's just on there, just a load of numbers on a spreadsheet. And again, so you're not seeing that. First of all, seeing it isn't particularly useful. I mean, you can kind of, I guess you can see the numbers go very small, maybe, or visits like they drop here, so you get something maybe out of that. But if you can't see it, then again you're listening to it, and if you listen to it, this is what you would hear. So you hear A1 wrap text figure 1, the title again, A2 overseas residence visits UK by month. Then this blank step is because I was trying to find, if you can't see that layout, imagine you can't see it, you're trying to find your way around just by moving the cursor around, moving the selected cell. You don't know where the data is because you don't know where the layout is. So then you get a load of like blanks. Then eventually you get to the data to get read out all the headings, and then just get read the numbers. But you've got to somehow remember what the heading was for that number. So basically, spreadsheets are very difficult. Even when they're marked up, they're not perfect, but they're definitely better. But the table is that, for this kind of chart, a table of data isn't really providing the equivalent experience, because there's quite a lot of data on there. So alt text, though, isn't just important for screen reader users. It's also important for people who see things low vision, who see things very blurred. So they might need a description of the chart as well, because they might be able to zoom in and read text. But they might not be able to zoom in and read a chart, because if you have to zoom in, imagine zooming in in a very small portion there. You need to see the chart as a whole thing. It's very hard to interpret charts when you have to just sort of zoom around them. So they would also benefit from alt text. And then other people, maybe got dyscalculia, or maybe just really don't like charts. I was talking to someone in a conference yesterday, and they said that if people have a bad experience of maths in school, sometimes they just won't look at charts. They just don't like charts because they just completely turns them off. So they might see something like this, and they just like, it doesn't make any sense to me. I can't interpret it. I don't like charts. So there's lots of other people who benefit from alt text, which is why when we talked about how we can help, first of all non-text content has a text alternative serves the equivalent purpose. So it's that equivalent purpose thing that's important. And then secondly, it's about where to put it. So it's about writing it so it's descriptive, and it's about where to put it. So this is what I would suggest in terms of how to write it. And it is a lot longer than if you've been used to put in alt text in the alt text field, and you put it behind an image. You're usually quite limited with characters. But charts are complex. You can't describe what's happening in that chart in like I can't remember, it's 250 characters or something very small. You need more. So this is my go at writing descriptive text that describes what's happening. So I start by talking about overseas residents falling very sharply, and then I talk about North America residents, and then European residents. And I put some numbers there. So there's some sort of anchor, some sort of reference of what the numbers are in there. And then sort of said, look, there's 2 million visits, almost equal to pre-pandemic levels. So that's an example of how you might write it. And then where should it go? Well, because like I said, it's not just the screen readers. It's lots of other people might need it, and they might not have any idea how to access the alt text. I find it really hard on most websites. I've got like a plugin now that sort of like, tells me what the alt text is, but generally I find it quite hard to find the alt text. So and our advice is that if you have a chart, directly underneath it, you should have a text description of what that chart is. And you should also provide source information and download information. Oh, that's really, really useful. But you should have the text description should come directly underneath. So that's the advice there. And then going back to think about tables. So tables can be the text alternative. Like that one back there, going back. That's too much. That's not an appropriate text alternative because there's too much going on. There's 4 columns. There's lots and lots of time, the time, there's loads and loads of rows in that data. So that's not appropriate. But with something like this, we've got this sort of cluster bar chart here. You haven't got many columns. You haven't got many rows of data. It can be a really appropriate text alternative. Somebody can get the information from there. And if you publish on gov.uk, I don't know if any of you do, but if you ever do, there's certain charts, they haven't got many, but certain charts where you can toggle between a chart and a table view. You've got to use their sort of back-end software to do that, but it does allow you to change, toggle between the 2 views, which can be really helpful for people. Like I said, lots of people, not just screen reader users, but lots of people. So I don't know if we're going to be able to do this quick exercise because it's a little bit lengthy, but maybe something to think about and maybe something you can take away and do at another time or with your teams or something like that. But generally what we try to do in kind of like our e-learning, we try to provide exercises for people to understand this bit better and get better at doing it, is we give you a chart. So this chart is about listed childcare arrangements. People who say that the listed childcare arrangement help them go to work. So the most common is children at school, and then like the sort of tax-free 33-hour scheme, 15-hour scheme. They're marking up a bit lower, but they're all the different ones that people might say. And the exercise is, how would you describe this chart over the phone? If you had to like pick up the phone and describe that chart to someone who cannot see it, how would you describe it? And that's the way to think about writing alt text. It's about how if you had to describe it, how would you describe it? So for this one, sometimes people say this is the alt text because this is the message of the chart. And it is the message of the chart. It gives you the main message. School is the most commonly stated childcare arrangement to help mothers work. But it's not really giving you an equivalent experience because there I have a lot more information just by glancing at it. I'm not taking absolutely everything in, but I get more information. So we do need to provide something a bit more. So this is my suggested sort of solution to this. Won't read through all of that, but that's the kind of exercises we provide through our new e-learning. It's not completely finished, but it is up there and you can have a look at it. And like I said, I'll share the links at the end. So that might be something that helps you. And then again, for this data, you could suggest a table. A table could be appropriate text alternative. There's only be one column. It's just a column of percentages, so it could be useful here. And this is like another exercise, but this shows you when you've got annotation, you've really got to incorporate that annotation into the alt text. Remember, they won't be able to read in the annotation either. So we'll go through that one now, but something else you can do. So these are just some other quick formatting rules, some mistakes mistakes may be a bit harsh, but some things we often pick up on charts we often see in the team. So again, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to do this. So we wanted you to say which is the better chart. So put your hand up if you think the chart on the right is better. Yeah, do quite a few hands up. So this isn't necessarily just about accessibility, it's also just about best practice. So you if you put your hand up, then you are right. Yeah, we don't want to see these kind of charts. We want to focus on these ones. So the problem with this one is that it's just got unnecessary clutter. I'm not going to mention everything because some of the stuff that's wrong with this one comes up in a few slides on. But it's got this grey background. Don't really need a grey background. Don't need this box around it. Don't need this. This should be kind of at the top. Don't need these extra decimal points here. Yeah, I'm not going to mention all the others, but yeah, try avoid the legend when you can for reasons we've explained. Don't use data markers when you don't need them. This has got data markers and dotted line, dashed lines. So yeah, really going for it, but yeah, aren't really needed. So that's why we say, right, avoid all that stuff. Keep it simple. So then this one, put your hand up if you think the one on the right is the better chart. Again, if you think the one on the right is best, put your hand up. Yep. Okay, yep. Two hands up, yep. And this one, yep, again, it definitely is. If anyone wants to say why they think that is, if anyone can say why they think that is, what? Oops. So yeah, why do we think the one on the right is better here? I don't know. I don't know the easiest way to come in. I know some of you got access to the chat. Through you, Rachel.
Yeah, so nobody's putting anything in the chat just yet. If anybody wants to just, I can't go for the raised hands because they're probably from before. And if somebody who still has their hand raised would like to, so why do you think the chart on the right is better?
Is it label orientation compared to the axis and the column?
Yes. Yeah, so basically you do not want to make anyone tilt their head. Nobody likes reading like this. You don't want to make anyone do that. That's not just an accessibility thing. Lots of people, most people don't like having to read with their head on a tilt. So yeah, we see this a lot. And we see it a lot. It's not just that, going back to, going back to that one. You see a lot of the time we see it here with axes labels, because I think that's the automated way. That's the way they come out. But you don't, and here you can see it here again. Yeah, don't put things at right angles, at slanted. Put all the text should be horizontal. It just makes it easier for everyone. Yeah, so that's the best advice we can give there in terms of formatting. And then this one, if you think the one on the right is better, can you put your hand up? Oh, yeah, that's going up there. Yeah, and then one on this one again. If anyone wants to unmute and say why it's better, this is quite an easy answer to this one. Why is the one on right better?
The additional lines make it really messy, don't they?
Yeah, so it's that there's additional lines and also that they're too dark. So yeah, there's loads of grid lines here. We say to like aim for 8, maybe 10 if you're doing a percentage, going up to 100%, but aim for 8 and don't make them too dark. Again, these don't pass the contrast requirements, so you can't see, some people might not be able to see the grid lines, but if you make them too dark, you make it too hard to read the chart. So again, they're not essential, they're necessary. And I know some people don't like any grid lines at all. So they're not, and we don't say they're essential, we just say that they can be really useful. But if you use them, don't use too many, and don't make them too dark. That's just basically that one. And then this one, so for this one, this would be quite fun actually. So if you could all put your hands down, everyone put their hands down a second. So we're going to have to be a bit inventive with this. If you think this bar chart doesn't need labels, put your hand up. If you like the labels, but you like them on the end of the bars, can you put your thumbs up? And if you like the data labels on the base of the bars, can you put a heart? So this is hand, thumb, heart. Hand, thumbs, heart. See what we get after that. I think there is a way to do a poll, but I'm not sure how to do it.
Yeah, I bet see, the thing with that is,
can everyone get reactions or not?
I think, yeah, they can do reactions,
but might not see it on the side.
They don't stay. They don't stay. So I think what you need to do very quickly is just count them as they come. But you're getting lots of hearts.
Lots of hearts. Okay, you can tell me that. Yeah, we've seen hearts. That's a rough thing. Oh, we've only got one hand, so only one person has said that one. Got a few hearts.
So either 2 or 3 people are preferring, but generally speaking, so it was hands, thumbs, hearts, wasn't it? From left to right.
Hearts, yeah.
Yeah.
So it would be really interesting to do. So this was, I can think of a better way of doing it. This was something that was put out by the head of database at ONS because he was looking into data labels and what people prefer. So he put this out on Twitter as a Twitter poll and asked people to vote for which one he preferred. So what they've always gone for in data viz is either you don't need them because a bar chart is not a table. If you think you need labels, provide a table of the data instead, or try to provide a table with like sort of spark bars, like little bars alongside. And then if you are going to do data labels, the advice used to be this one. So it's interesting that we saw a lot of hearts. Like the advice was always this, because here the numbers are aligned. So tens are over tens, units over units, decimals over the correct decimal place, apart from we go off. But generally they're aligned. And then for this one, there's always one that was discouraged because they said, well, they're on the end of the bars, they're not aligned, so it's harder to compare the number. But what he found on Twitter was that this was the most preferred. So thumbs up one, the middle one was the most preferred on his Twitter poll. But generally what it revealed, it was not particularly conclusive. And but the one thing that was conclusive was that people liked them. So people do like data labels. But whether they prefer them to tables is not a statistically significant result. But yeah, they can be useful. People do sometimes like them. And if you use them, it's really a toss-up between where you put them. Some people prefer them here, some people prefer them on the end. You just have to be careful. You have to be careful of contrast so that you've got enough contrast between that. Careful of size. Make sure the size is big enough for people to see. And just think about whether like a table of the data would be useful alongside a bar chart as well. It's just a bit of a funny one with data labels, value labels. Be careful when you use them. That's all I'm saying that. Oh, so most of the time we're publishing, I would think, maybe not, but publishing static publications. So this is just slides. It gives an example of like the best practice way to provide stuff in a static publication. So we do like, say we say a headline title, which gives a sort of main message, can be a bit funny, depending on your data, obviously. This one is here. So talking about Oliver stays on top of the baby names list. Then you have your stat title. One of these titles should have the figure number. That helps people sort of navigate through a document where there can be lots of figures. Tend to say use figure instead of chart, because sometimes you might have charts, you might have tables. Easier if you just call them all figures. And then that's your statty title. It says exactly what the data is. Then you've got your image. Oh, I can put my clicks on. Then you've got your image. So it's not something we've touched on much here, but if you are going to upload an image of a chart, if you don't have any way to do it, you should upload an SVG. Oh, I think I have gone over. Sorry, I've gone too. I'm nearly done. I just looked at the time. Yeah, an SVG is a better format. It's a format that means you can zoom in and it'll retain its clarity. Screen reader, you should mark it as decorative in the actual alt text field. So screen reader skips over it. Then you should have your alternative text. And that should, as far as you can, give an equivalent experience looking at the chart. And like we said, should be in the body text of the page immediately after. Then you should give your information on source with a link to the source. Then you download information, and then any notes only if they're necessary. So that's like the best practice way of laying out all that information. Yeah, you get all gold stars and green ticks for that. If you're interactive publications, sort of the best example that's held up as a really good example of an interactive publication is the COVID dashboard. And I do really like the COVID dashboard. I did use it myself in lockdown. I think it was really, really useful, really well done. But if you look at their accessibility statement, this is all the stuff that they've picked up on that isn't accessible. So making interactive publications is really hard to make them accessible. And it does kind of not a little bit annoying because some of this stuff they could fix. And it was tested in April 2020, and it doesn't seem like they've really fixed anything since then. So they could make it better, but obviously it's less used now, so maybe there's less drive to fix the things. But I think what it does draw attention to is if you build accessibility in from the start, you won't make some of these mistakes. So like one of these things is just a contrast on the zoom button is not meeting the contrast. So if you thought about that from the start, that's just something you could easily build in. So just build accessibility in from the start. Don't add it in at the end because then it becomes problematic. And lastly, testing is really, really good to test all your stuff. Test it with, if you've got colleagues who've got impairments or disabilities, test it with them if they're happy to. If you've got maybe networks, I know ONS has a network of people who are happy to test stuff and give feedback on their different medical conditions or disabilities. Put it out on Twitter if you can. You can use the champions we've got presentation champions across government to ask them to test stuff. We've also got a Basecamp network, which you can all, you're all welcome to join. It's a way of bringing everyone together just to talk about accessibility stuff, but also just best practice in terms of stuff. So all the information, like I said, is on our support page. But yeah, testing is really, really important. So thank you. I'm sorry I've gone on a little bit. I don't know, am I to time? I'm not sure when I was meant to finish. But yeah, I might have gone on a little bit. So that is the QR code. You can just scan that now. If it's on your screen, you'll be taken straight to our support page. If you don't want to do that, that is the URL for our support page. All of our support is listed on there. That's my email if you want to contact me. That's where I am on Twitter. And if you could give us some feedback on this presentation, that would be really, really good. We're always being asked for metrics on the support we provide and the stuff we talk about. So if you could give us just a really short survey, that would be really helpful. And I hope it's been useful this morning.
That's been fantastically useful. Thank you, Hannah. That's great. And thanks for coming today. Really appreciate it. There's lots of people here who are benefiting, I'm sure, going forward. And I think not just going to be useful for people who may have disabilities, reading stuff, accessing stuff. It's just useful stuff and guidance for anyone and everyone anyway, isn't it? And good practice as well. So just make things easier for and more accessible for everyone. I've already, just looking at the comments, one or two were just responding to the questions that you were asking about why they've chosen certain charts and stuff. So just very quickly, someone has said they've already been inspired by the chat and they've turned on high contrast in Windows setting and it changed the Power BI charts. Interesting, they say. So I think it's just food for thought as well as much as anything else. And also, if anybody has been trying to interpret those guidance, guidelines, I think that's really useful. It just made it more. Well, you've done the work, basically, haven't you, Hannah?
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, to make it easier for everyone to actually implement the stuff.
Yeah.
Because, it's not. They're not for something that's meant all about accessibility. Those guidelines are not particularly accessible. They're not written in a particularly accessible way.
The irony.
Yes, it is very ironic. But that is a good point. And lots of stuff we do for accessibility is useful. Has like tip over effects. Is useful for lots of other people as well.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you again ever so much for coming in. I've just got 1 minute left just to tell people. I'll just share my screen again about the. No, you don't have to. I'll just take it away from you, Hannah. You don't have to do anything. So just coming up in the next few huddles, the next huddle we've been waiting for is Andrew Jones. I don't know whether he's on the line today. So he's going to be reporting back on his MDFM major project, which is the growth of diagnostic testing affecting NHS practice. I am very much looking forward to that. Then we're going to hear all about the strategy unit, brand new data science team, which is small but expanding rapidly. So Chris Bealey and Zoe Turner are going to be telling us about that in a couple of huddles time, and we still are going to be learning more about reproducible analytical pipelines, and that will be Chris Bealey again in the future, sometime in the future. Looking forward to all of that. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. I know I've got to go and put eye drops in my bed, and I will look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. So thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. The sun is out. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.